there are a couple of levels to these talks that I give. Okay, on one level is very practical advice and guidance, how to communicate more effectively with others, to get your needs met, how to become more successful, how to be happier. And a lot of it revolves around choices that we make in our mind, a cognitive therapy approach of what you think is what you get. Thoughts precede emotions, precede behaviors. So if your thoughts are clear and organized and wise and positive, you'll have a better more positive emotions and most likely more positive behaviors and outcomes in your life. So a lot of practical advice for the average person who's struggling to make sense out of this world, who's struggling to find happiness and love, sustainable, loving relationships, and things like that. But there's another level to these talks, and that is to try to encourage people to go to a higher kind of consciousness level, a higher spiritual level, to not settle for the default behaviors that they have of harshly judging others, being very critical, being very negative, instead trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, instead trying to see the good in people despite how they're behaving, instead try to be generous and loving and kind to people and forgiving as much as possible, to be as accepting and as tolerant as possible, to elevate your consciousness, to elevate your heart and mind, your spirit, your soul, to get to a better understanding of our interconnectedness, of our responsibility to each other, that we are all actually cut from the same cloth. We are all part of the same jigsaw puzzle, and each puzzle piece looks different, but we're all integral to the whole, to the oneness. And so it just makes no sense for us to be attacking each other and and so it's better to find a way to love, accept, and forgive others despite how they're behaving. And this is very difficult to do unconditionally and without exception across the board, because a lot of people do a lot of awful things, which is why I tell people, we forgive others for our own peace of mind. You forgive and accept and love others as best you can, as much as you can, to actually clear your own karma, your own baggage, because it will release you from an emotional prism of victimhood and shame and guilt and self-loathing. And it'll help clear the deck of self-sabotaging behaviors that are getting in the way of your happiness, your material success, your relationship success, etc. So there are two levels. There's one level is, okay, how do you deal with somebody who always yells and interrupts you? And another level is, how can you be more loving and forgiving and accepting and tolerant despite how sick and crazy this world is? How can you expand your awareness of love's presence within you and within everyone despite how they're behaving? So there are multiple purposes to this. So the point is that oftentimes when I am at the level talking about unconditional forgiveness, acceptance, and love to toxic people, to anybody without exception, there are a certain number of people who get very adamant that it can't. No, that doesn't work. That's bad advice. That's dangerous advice. That's stupid, etc. Very dogmatic, very stubborn, very positive that their worldview is the correct one, that their understanding of human nature is the correct one, and based upon their personal experience. And so I'm not saying that they're wrong. They're totally entitled to have a worldview based upon their experience, based upon their education, based upon the stories that they've heard, based upon what they've seen. Everyone's entitled to every position and philosophy that they have. They're entitled to it. And but open-mindedness is critical. And just because your life experience tells you that that can't possibly work that way, in my opinion, you still need to be open-minded and considerate. Consider the possibility that what you're hearing might be true. Somebody was telling me about Alexander Hamilton, that he was a really stubborn, dogmatic guy, a brilliant, self-made man, very brilliant, but very stubborn and dogmatic. But he said, I listen to everything my enemies say, because, once in a while they just might be right, and whether they're enemies or friends. If people you feel that they don't have much credibility, so why should you listen to anything they say? The weird thing is, just like a clock is right twice a day, a broken clock is right twice a day. No, there are people who you may feel are very problematic, and they're telling you stuff that you inherently, it goes against your common sense, your intuition, everything you believe in. The premise is that what I'm trying to say is you should still keep an open mind, and just don't automatically assume that everything coming out of their mouth can't possibly be true or can't work. Okay, you need to try to consider the possibility that something that someone is suggesting might work. It might be possible. It might sound like magical thinking. It might sound unrealistic. It might sound absurd. But you should not just negate it and reject it out of hand. You need to try to evaluate it on its merits. Consider it the possibility. A lot of times, look, going back in what the Earth goes around the sun. The Earth isn't flat. People are going to fly in airplanes and in spaceships. That's absurd. What, you're going to have a phone that that does everything, that does a typewriter for you, typewrites, and has VHS tapes and CDs, my cameras. No one would ever have thought this is possible. People are always rejecting what seems impossible until it becomes possible, until it happens. So my point in general, though, is don't be so stubborn and dogmatic. You may be right, but you should always evaluate everything, particularly because of what we have going on today more than ever, and that is confirmation bias. That's, the best example is, of course, Donald Trump now, because people who hate him and I think he's a terrible human being and mentally ill and not competent to be president. It doesn't matter what he says. It doesn't matter. He could say something that's fair and reasonable, and the confirmation bias is that you are going to perceive it. You're going to take it out of context and perceive it in a certain way that it confirms your bias about the guy, which is that he's whatever, sexist, rapist, racist, misogynist, whatever whatever you want to call him. Yeah. This confirmation bias is a big mistake. So it's best to try to actually have critical thinking. Critical thinking is critical. So that means that when, let's say, he says something, try to actually see it through the lens of your unbiasedness. If somebody else were to say it, if Barack Obama were to say it, or if Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders were to say it, on face value, would it offend you? Would you see that it's sinister and evil and racist or sexist? You might. But if your answer is, if you are really honest and you go, no, if Barack Obama said that, I wouldn't have any problem with that, then you start to see that you've got a bias that is enabling you to misperceive. And again, the same thing is true of Hillary Clinton. Whoever your favorite is, if your favorite is Hillary Clinton, your favorite person to hate, I mean, then or Barack Obama is your favorite person to hate, then whatever comes out of her mouth or his mouth, you're going to see it through the lens of your bias. And so you're going to imply or infer what you think they meant. What he really meant, or that was really a threat, or she was really covering up this, or she was really doing that. And so that again, they get painted with this broad brush, and nothing out of their mouths can possibly be true or fair or reasonable. And this makes for the mess that we're in now. We have to be able to have critical thinking and be able to evaluate anything anyone says. If we like somebody, we've got to be able to say, I like them, but what they did here was really bad. Or I don't like them, but what they did here was actually good and made sense. We need to be able to have that, ironically, that fair and balanced position, and we don't. The polarization, the intense rage and negativity at the drop of a hat. I mean, honestly, it seems to me that if Donald Trump were to tweet "the sky is blue," people would respond that that's a racist comment, that's a sexist comment, that shows that he's mentally ill, that shows that he's incompetent to be president, that shows that he should be impeached. Obviously, this is a huge exaggeration, using the example, the sky is blue. But it really is, to some degree, that's the way it really is. It doesn't matter what he says. It's like we're going to see it through a certain lens and use that lens to crucify him. Okay, if we loved him, then we use that lens to accept him and adore him with all of his ridiculous and abrasive and shocking things he says. It goes many ways. But the point is, everyone's so worried about the future, about whether he's going to blow us all up. That's not the big problem. The big problem is, are we going to destroy the fabric of our society, of our families, of our friendships, of our society, because we disagree with each other? That's the whole point of a democracy, is that you're going to disagree. And that, one side's going to win sometimes, and then your side's going to win sometimes. But overall, you try to go forward and make progress, not be oppositional to each other forever. So first, the Republicans are oppositional to Obama, and very little gets done. And now Democrats are oppositional to Trump and the Republicans. So now nothing's going to get done, or he'll sign a bunch of stuff in as executive orders, and then the next cycle, when a Democrat's there, they'll sign him out again, and we stagnate. We go nowhere. We don't make any progress. So how can we ever come to a consensus in any relationship with any X number of people if we have this bias that gets in the way of our objectivity? That's why critical thinking. Look at the facts, not fiction, not feelings. Look at the facts. And if there are people who have been lying to you, or you've caught them in lies, then when they tell you something, you can't assume it's a fact anymore. Now you've got to assume that it could be a lie. You got to examine and even the facts that seem factual have to be verified, because there's so much distortion, and the agenda, it seems to me, is money and power. That's really pushing all of this, and we the people are pawns, no matter what side we're on. I think we're pawns of all the rich and powerful people in Hollywood, in Washington, Republicans, Democrats, big business, Wall Street. We're victims and pawns of the social media that has given us so much joy, and quite ironically, so much pain as well.